Hey Gen Max, welcome to Bucerias, and today we are talking about investing in Mexico. So, investment number one is your primary residence in Mexico, but what I'm talking about today is investing beyond your primary residence. So, moving money from the United States or from Canada, having money invested in pesos, in real property here in Mexico. And I've got someone who is an expert at this, and that is Joel from the Accidental Retiree. You'll find him on YouTube too, but you'll also find him in this video in just a couple of seconds.
So I'm Joel, the Accidental Retiree. You can find me here on YouTube. I live in Bucerias, been living here for 13 years. And why the Accidental Retiree? Was just looking for a new brand. I used to be known as Bucerias Joel, but since my wife and I are newly retired, we're doing a lot more traveling, a lot more lifestyle stuff, kind of doing more investment type content. I want to kind of get out of that pigeonhole of just being, the guy that did the taco tours in Bucerias every day. So it's been a little bit of a struggle with the algo to try to break out of the taco guy. But I think we're just kind of keeping at it. And I guess at the end, I'm accidentally retired in Mexico. Really moved here with no intent to do that, but Mexico allowed us to actually reach that dream, and much sooner than anticipated.
Well, I love the idea of being almost retired in Mexico, soon to be retired maybe. Well, actually, I've decided that this YouTube channel will be my retirement project. So if you want to go over to buymeacoffee.com and make me a little bit closer to that goal of having this be my only form of revenue, that would be much appreciated. But let's go back to Joel and hear kind of his story before he moved to Mexico and how he got here.
Yeah, I'm from Canada. Originally had a corporate gig in Calgary up into my 30s. Decided to leave corporate and become an entrepreneur, and went into real estate immediately because it was something I always dabbled with. Even when I was at corporate, I was a real estate investor. My wife and I started a building and development company in Calgary, and we became, moderately successful.
So I want to break in real quick and make sure that I'm not biting off more than I can chew, because Joel clearly has a lot of experience with this. So let's hear, before we continue with the story, if this video is going to be about something that the average Joe can do.
Yeah, I think if you come into Mexico with the right mindset, it is not more you're not going to bite off more than you can chew unless you kind of set yourself up to do that. So it's really important that if you come here to invest, whether that's in real estate or opening a business, that you do it in, the best way to describe it is baby steps.
Great. So hopefully you're sticking around now, and let's have Joel continue with his story.
All right. Well, I'm not going to totally bore you guys with what we did in Canada, but my wife and I set up a very successful inner city development company. We built a lot of units in the city of Calgary over the course of a decade. But it came to the end of one big project. We won a couple of awards for it. It took a lot of our life. It zapped so much energy from us because it was our largest project to that date. And once we finally completed it, we said, you know what, before life gets away on us, we got to go spend a year somewhere. So originally it was going to be France, and we were ready to move to France, but it became very, very complicated. So one day we're here on vacation, like we normally would every year, and my wife said, Joel, why don't we just move to Mexico? It's going to be so much easier. And I said, you know what, honey? I think you're right. So we sold our houses, we sold our cars, we packed the kids into a little RV that we bought. We all packed one suitcase and one tote, and we moved to Mexico for 1 year. And 13 years later, we're still here.
Yeah, and this is starting to sound very similar to our story. We also bought an RV and drove that down for the first 2 years. We brought way more than one suitcase and one tote, but we were well stocked, I guess. We, of course, bought our house first and then bought the RV and down the line. So you can hear my story somewhere else on this channel. But let's see now, Joel lands here for a year, and what does that look like, and how has he ended up here in this gorgeous home? And we're going to give you a tour of the home, talk about the development that it's in, and a little bit more too.
Arrived in Bucerias 13 years ago, and we really wanted to make this a bit of a, I guess almost like a social experiment, re-engineering the way we used to live back in Canada. So the first thing we did was we started a business, and we didn't just arrive here and start it. We already kind of pre-planned around it. I was a huge cyclist. I sponsored a racing cycling team in Canada. And every time we came to Mexico, I'm like, man, the cycling here is so good. Because I used to ride my bike, but no one would ever think about coming to Mexico and actually coming on a cycling tour. And the reason being was, well, the whole mainstream media and the way they position Mexico, it just doesn't seem like a safe place for a cyclist to go, but it really was. So we thought, well, this is a missing opportunity here. So the first thing we did when we arrived was we opened a little cycling tour business. And again, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but we started with 4 bikes 13 years ago, and I recently sold it to another Canadian couple, and they have close to 100 bikes on their inventory and doing quite a healthy amount of revenue over 6 to 7 months a year. It was an amount of revenue that essentially sustained our lifestyle. So our first goal was, let's create a business that can sustain the lifestyle that we want, so that we're not drawing from our investments in Canada, that we can actually sustain ourselves right here in Bucerias, Mexico. And that was it. We opened the business. That was number one.
So opening a business, I would love to know about red tape. I know it's easier than becoming an employee, because the Mexican government doesn't want you to take a job from a Mexican. However, you're more than welcome to open a business. So let's just kind of hear what it's like to open a business in Mexico.
Actually, it was surprisingly straightforward, and I would almost suggest it was easier than doing a very similar thing in Canada. But I did hire an expert, so I didn't want to go through any of the red tape myself. So I hired a consultant to basically get all my permits, get all that stuff done, like my RFC. Back then, it was maybe a little bit different than it is now, but got my tax number, got the business permit. But once that was done, we literally opened the doors. It actually seemed it was surprisingly efficient for what we actually went through. And then the pleasant surprises was not a huge business tax. Like running a business like this in Canada, the business tax alone would probably run us about $2,000 a month. If you just think about that, right? And that's not even your rent. That's just the business taxes. And we don't have that here in Mexico. The rents were cheaper. The employee costs were cheaper. Like everything was a lot less than what we would have had to spend in Canada, with the exception of our bike inventory. Because if I'm bringing in a bike from China, it doesn't matter if, you're bringing in the same bike to Canada or the US, so the bike is going to cost you the same amount of money. So those costs were about the same, if not maybe just slightly more. But surprisingly, opening a business here and getting going was pretty straightforward. Yeah,
I can say from running this YouTube channel is running as a business. I make a little bit of revenue here and there, and I just have an accountant who handles invoicing and taxes. It's on a monthly basis, but yeah, it's pretty simple. But let's see where growth happened from there, and we're going to hear the whole story of growth, and then we're going to get some tips from Joel as to what you can do if you're starting out in Mexico as an investor. You want to move some money here.
Bicycle business just would grow. By the time we were at year 3, we were pretty profitable. It was, again, paying for our existence. It kind of took that first 2 years. So I think one important thing is, don't come here expecting that if you're going to start a business from scratch, that you're going to hit the road running and be earning like all the income you're going to need to sustain yourself. We started this from scratch. So we had to put the time, the effort, the marketing, and all the work that was required to actually make it a successful business. But the only hiccup we had was during COVID, probably for about the first year and a half, 2 years of it. But then once everything kind of settled down, we were back out to races. The people that bought it from us, they made the decision to buy a business, and that is a reasonable option. So rather than them investing money and starting from scratch, they came in and bought a business that was already existing and had permits in place, had bike inventory in place, customers, and literally they just turned the key and started. So they were off to the races. So that is a pretty viable option. And I don't think a lot of people think about moving to Mexico and buying a business here, but whether it's, maybe you could think of a franchise. Like you could buy a Subway here just the same as you could buy a Subway in the United States. So there are things that maybe you're not quite thinking about that you could almost do the same stuff you would do in Canada or the States. You could do the same thing here. So if you're not quite ready for retirement and you need a way to sustain yourself, it doesn't all have to be about real estate. It could be a simple, boring business. It could be a parking lot. It could be I saw some people open a laundromat, and they're doing very, very well, right? So there's all sorts of ways that you could look at investing here to earn yourself, some passive income that maybe you're not having to spend a lot of time earning.
From the idea of a business, a retail business, let's switch over to real estate.
Right. Well, I think, basically I was born thinking about real estate. I'm pretty sure I bought my first house when I was 19. So I've always been very interested in real estate. I understood the value of owning it and how that could benefit me in the future. So we've owned real estate in Mexico now 20 years. So we bought our first house 20 years ago. Then we bought a second property the year after that. It was just a rental property. When we first moved here, I wanted nothing to do with any construction. I wanted nothing to do with real estate. So we literally took 5 years off from it. But then I got itchy and found a property in the Golden Zone that I had a vision for. And that was the very first one that we bought. And we built 12 units there. And that just kind of kickstarted it from that point. And since that breaking of ground, I think it was 7 years ago, I have to check the exact date, we've since built or renovated just over 80 units. But now I'm done. I'm done again. I need at least a good 5-year hiatus from that. But here's the one thing I will say. I came from Canada building fairly big projects, so I came with a certain skill set. So if you want to get into real estate here, I think there's an incredible opportunity over the next, call it 3 or 4 decades, especially for young people. And I say to my kids, if I was in my 20s, I would just be here in Mexico looking at where is the next place I could invest in real estate and make myself a lot of money. But I'm in my late 50s right now, so I'm thinking more on what can I invest in real estate that's a little bit more sitting there and going to appreciate. So I'm turned from more of a let's buy the land and create something on it to let's buy the land and hold it and rezone it and maybe sell it to a developer 7 to 10 years from now. So that's where my focus is. So if you want to get in the real estate game, it's what do you know about it? Are you bringing in a huge skill set? Then you can still start small, but you're going to be able to scale your way up. If you're coming with a lesser skill set, you need to start very, very small and taper your expectations. Be prepared to fail on your first project, for sure.
Okay, I am crossing my fingers because, as you know, if you're following this channel, I am in my first project. Kat and I did buy an investment property and we're renovating it right now. And a little bit of history of the property is it started out as an RV park that never opened. And then it was turned into an artist camp that never opened. And we're number 3. So we are hoping to turn it into a short-term rental. And I am crossing my fingers for that thing to open because it is a significant investment in our world. And it's something that we were thinking we want to have more assets outside the United States. Things are just a little bit iffy in the United States right now. The dollar is going down. It's just nice to have international investments. So I'm going to have Joel talk about that a little bit, about the value of investing, not just in the US or Canada, but the value of investing in Mexico. And also, I'd like to know if he has anything back in the United States or Canada still.
When I say be prepared to fail, it's not like you're going to fail and you're going to lose your money or something like that. But be prepared to fail from your original expectations, right? If it's your first project, it may not turn out exactly the way you wanted it. Doesn't mean you're going to go broke from it, right? But just taper the expectations and whatever failure there is, because even to this day, every project I do, there's always a degree of failure. You got to learn from it, right? But I've seen your project on your channel, and I feel pretty good about it, actually. I think you're onto something there. So we still own some real estate in Canada. I have some other investments in Canada, call it our retirement savings. I've gotten a little more active in the stock market in the last 3 years, and kind of develop my own kind of system around that. So I share a lot of that stuff on Patreon, actually. And but it's not like a financial advice channel. I just literally share everything it is I'm doing, and my followers make their own decisions. But what I do like about Mexican real estate, well, first and foremost, I see Mexico in general as where the United States was post-war, like sometime in the 50s. And it's got like a huge, huge runway ahead of it. And that's why I'm saying, like, when I think of my kids and they're in their 20s, I'm like, guys, you got to be here in Mexico, man. No, we want to live in Canada. No, you got to be here, because literally, if you put your mind to it and you start investing in some really strategic real estate here, you're going to be set. By the time you're my age, you're not going to be thinking about anything, because there's a huge runway of opportunity here. But the interesting thing I've seen is, yes, we got this fluctuation with the US dollar, the Canadian dollar against the peso. The peso has been pretty strong lately, but that's not to say we're not going to see a resurgence in the dollar. And I actually think we will see a resurgence in the US dollar, especially in the short term, just because it's still a place where people fly to safety. But if you're looking at Mexico with more of a 10, 15, 20-year horizon, I think the peso is going to continuously gain strength against the US dollar, and the US dollar is going to continuously weaken against the peso. But that is like long term. I don't really think it's happening tomorrow. But the last thing I wanted to mention, which a lot of things are priced here in dollars, but the funny thing is that when the peso gets like super strong, it frickin' flips. And then all of a sudden things are priced in pesos. So you don't really have a devaluation on your Mexican property just because there's a weakening US dollar. And it's kind of weird, but it's just really the way it works. So I think it's a nice currency hedge if the peso goes down, because your property is protected in US dollars. And it's also a nice currency hedge if the US dollar goes down, because then it just flips and your property is protected in pesos. It's kind of, it's weird, but this is one country where it really, really does work that way.
So my brother-in-law, Paul, said, don't invest in single-family real estate. You got to get at least a duplex, because then you always have two incomes. And that seems to be how people proceed in the United States in terms of putting their toe in the water, is to buy a duplex, and then you buy a fourplex. My father owned a fourplex, and kind of grow from there. So I'm just wondering if there's something similar down here in Mexico.
It's possible that you could actually find something that's already done, like a fourplex, a sixplex, a whatnot. But what we've done, and I've helped actually people do here, is buy a house that's big and has the potential, and you just chop it up. So my friend Phil Guyman, who's a retired pro cyclist, he owns a property called Casa Familia, and it was just a family home, and we chopped it up into 4 units. So it's now 2 studios and 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, and the bottom one has a really beautiful pool. And the first project I did before I actually built something was Casa Victoria. And again, we started with an up and down duplex. It was a 3-bedroom, 3-bath on each floor with a little casita. So that's what we started with. And we chopped that up into 6 units to 4 2-bedroom, 2 baths, 2 1-bedrooms. And then we split off the casita and built it into a 3-story and sold that to someone else. So that is the cool thing about Mexico. And again, you have to be willing to kind of roll with the punches on it, but there's just no way you're going to be able to do this in the States or Canada. Maybe in some states that are just a little bit more freewheeling, I don't know, like Texas or something somewhere in the country. But for sure in Calgary, if I tried to do this, I wouldn't even get into the permit application phase. Like it just would not happen. The amount of hoops you would have to go through. Here you can go through those hoops pretty quickly if you know the right people to help navigate the way.
Well, actually, that's great. I want to refer to a video. It's with Rennie. It's up in one of the corners here. She's Canadian and moved down to Mexico and turned a duplex into a duplex plus a short-term rental by splitting up her unit. And now she has more income. So she's able to survive. She doesn't have much of a pension up in Canada because she didn't work in Canada very much. She ended up working overseas. So be sure to check out that video. It's one of my most popular. It is my most popular video. So I want to switch gears now, and we're still going to get a tip from Joel as to something about investing in Mexico. But I do want to switch gears and see a little bit of his home here.
So, well, one thing, all of our projects have a door like this. We call it the Maravilla door. So it's usually blue, sometimes it's white. There's a house, I just built that house for these guys, but they have the Maravilla door, but it's white. Cool. Just some green as soon as you walk into our home. We have 2 entrances, so one off Cinco de Mayo here, and one off the front street is where our garage is. This has already grown quite nicely. Give it another 5 or 6 more years, it'll be like a little jungle. We have my in-laws, Bob and Lynn, but we won't bother them, but they'll give a little wave. But they have a beautiful little one bedroom, one bathroom with a nice kitchen. And how do you guys like living here? Even with me? Oh, that's a struggle. No, it's all good. We wanted to have like no maintenance because we got animals. We got 4 cats, 2 dogs. So if this was like grass, they're gonna chew it up. If there's like anything like with plants, they're gonna pee all over it. So we didn't want our courtyard to smell like a cat litter box or dog bathroom. So everything is in planters, and we put stones in the planters to keep the cats out. And it really is old style. Think of an old Mexican hacienda. It's based on that type of design, but we've modernized it. So instead of like big arches and that, we have more straight lines. But you have the kitchen, living room on that end. This maybe would have been a bedroom, but now it's an apartment. We did like a full bath there for guests. Little outdoor area we use quite a bit in the cooler season. I did that little brick wall to give a little bit more character. And yeah, floor to ceiling glass. And especially in the evenings, we'll open this up, and like this time of year is like awesome. I don't know how it is where you live right now, but
It's pretty awesome right now.
It's like perfect weather, so we rarely use the AC. I have it on now just so that you and I were a little bit more comfortable. But I like to cook a lot, so I know, but kitchen was important, so we got, nice fridge, good stove, got lots of workspace for my prepping and whatnot. So we spend a lot of time here. We don't eat out a lot, which is kind of funny. The longer we've lived in Mexico, we have our favorite restaurants, but literally we're pretty well cooking almost every day. We eat out once a week at most, or we order some takeout. But we wanted this to be like our space, like it's almost, this is where we live, except when we're sleeping. So we're watching Netflix here. Julie and I made our little office space, and this is where all the ideas happen. And I have this atrium space here that's still a work in progress, but I've got my gardener working on some ideas so that this whole wall is going to become green, and we're just like filling it up. Because I didn't want to have exposure to the front street. I didn't want any windows, nothing here. So we're just like straight on wall. So I said, well, instead of having all this as like kind of useless living space, we'll just make that an atrium. And it just adds in a little bit of light. And in the rainy season, it's nice because it kind of rains in here and we're working away. And yeah, that's the living space. Wine fridge is very important for us. I could take you upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, originally with the bike business, we thought our kids were going to take it over, but they decided to opt out of that option. So we built this house in mind with, that's, I could actually take you through this. Jillian's having a little nap in this bedroom, but we can go through here. But this is my daughter's apartment. So if my parents only gave me an apartment like this when I was 23 years old, but she's probably got one of the nicest.
Oh, wow.
She's got one of the nicest views.
Cool.
Yeah. She's got her little kitchen. She doesn't cook in here, but it's nice. And but I also built this in mind with one day we'll move from here, and I wanted rentals. So this will become a rental. Another little cool feature we designed in it was, because we're working with generally speaking, pretty tight space, we always like to create some outdoor living area. You can feel how bright it is in here, right? And even this, normally in Mexico you build right to the property line because you want to get as much square footage as you can. But what we did in both those units is we just brought the wall in a little bit, and we created again another atrium. So see the downstairs unit, they got all this plants there for their bedroom, and just lets in But also I wanted something in the future, if this is like a rental, like someone's gonna show up to this rental and be like, this is super comfortable and I'm enjoying it here, right? Views and, hey chickie? But that view is,
That's pretty amazing.
that's pretty amazing. I'll send you a drone shot too.
Yes.
So that's got its own bath. There's a second bedroom there, but my wife is having a little nap.
That's okay.
And but this is the guest bathroom. And here we wanted to keep open. You know, we could have glassed it over, but we really wanted to have more of an outdoor feel up here. The only problem was in the rainy season, this freaking bridge would get like flooded. We'd have water like going into all the bedrooms, and we're out here with squeegees. And then so we installed this, and believe it or not, like that takes care of 95% of the rain from the winds. And then we just have a little bit of water that we have to deal with. And that's the other thing in Mexico, the rain. I don't know what it is, but it's just much more different than in Canada or the States. It's just,
Yeah, even in La Paz, it's dry, but when it rains, it rains.
yeah, in our master bedroom, we wanted it to be a space we could hang out. And then eventually, again, if it becomes a rental, I wanted this to be like a unit that I could like modify, maybe add like a little kitchen, but enough space in here that someone could like rent this out and it'd be like super comfortable. We did windows on both sides, so you got like airflow, and then the killer is the view off the balcony. I have a roof, and I have the bathroom and the roof, and that's kind of, we like to work with concrete, so all the floors are concrete, the walls are concrete. We made our sinks, like handmade sinks. That's another cool thing, like these are the things you can actually do in Mexico that would cost you a freaking fortune, like back home, because no one knows how to like do the stuff. But again, you got to kind of like taper your expectations that this is like, there's nothing straight here, but that's the look we're kind of going for. So it's like imperfect perfection. We have roof space, so we're gonna make use of it for solar because, as you know, if you use air conditioner in Mexico, your electrical bill can get quite high. So this keeps our bill low. We kind of put enough into the grid when we're not using it that the bill is as close to zero as it's going to get. But eventually we can add another floor of space here. So we kind of envision maybe 2 more apartments sometime in the future. And then we would just move the solar panels up above that. But this would be a beautiful apartment with a pretty incredible view.
So I'm guessing you agree that this is just a gorgeous place, and this is actually built into a development. This is kind of an L-shaped house or series of houses that is built around a development. So let's hear a little bit about the building that's right next door.
Well, the project's called Hacienda Cinco de Mayo, and so there's 9 condos. Basically, there's 9 condos in my house, okay? And in my house, there's 2 apartments plus my living area, but we're all part of the same development. But my house is like 1 condo, and then next door, there's 9 apartments, which represent actually 4 condos. And I know that might sound a little complicated, but on 2 floors, it's like one condo, even though they have 3 apartments. And then on the top floor, there's 2 apartments as 1 condo and 1 apartment that's on its own.
So that is really an interesting thing. So it's divide up into condos so that they can be sold, but then those are divided into apartments. So I want to hear just a little bit about that.
So the municipality gave us approval for 5 units. Okay, so 5 titled units. So my house is 1 titled unit. Okay, even though I have, let's call it 3 apartments in my little compound here. And then next door, basically every floor is 1 unit, but there's 3 apartments on every floor. The only exception is the top floor, because we had 1 extra unit available as an approval, not extra space, but just an extra unit that could be subdivided. So we made 1 condo 2 units, and then 1 condo is just a studio. But it was a great way for people to actually basically buy a whole floor, have 3 units for literally, instead of buying a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, they bought 3 condos.
So that is a great unexpected way to invest in property in Mexico, is to buy a condo that's broken up like that. I'm not sure if that is anything that's common at all, but it is an interesting thing. And as you get involved in searching for investments in Mexico, I think more different ways of doing things are going to pop up for you. So let's wrap up the video with Joel's #1 tip for you if you are moving to Mexico and thinking about investing in Mexico, or you're living in Mexico thinking about investing or investing more.
All right, well, I'm going to make this a 2-in-1. It's a twofer. Okay, so first and foremost is don't be scared. Okay, so like don't believe the negative hype about Mexico. Now, that's not to say we don't have problems here, but let's face it, folks, there's problems all over the world, right? So it's like you pick where you want to deal with your problems, right? But don't be afraid to actually do it. So that's like #1. But I think #2 is like listen to your own ability, and like whatever your skill set is, don't really go above that. You know, so start small, and then over time learn from what you've done here, learn from how you've invested, and then over time you're just going to make better and better decisions. You're going to see more and more opportunities as you become more comfortable investing. But I think you just got to rip the Band-Aid off. You got to do it. So don't be afraid. Just make it happen. But start at a scale that you can deal with, right? But that's like anything, right? I have a lot of people that are just starting to invest in the stock market. I'm like, don't like go all in. Like start like super small and like build up your knowledge base and your ability to continue to make good decisions. The same rules apply here in Mexico, but don't be scared.
So perfect advice. If you're new, have a very small Band-Aid that you rip off. And then once it grows, just get a bigger and bigger Band-Aid to rip off. So I've got more videos for you to watch. One is the video with Rennie out of Guadalajara. Otherwise, I've got one with Shasta down here, which is about real estate in the Bucerias area. So you can connect with her if you're interested in purchasing in this area. Definitely check out Joel's channel. That one will be down here. See lots of great information, lots of great advice around investing over there. So from Bucerias, wish you were here. Hasta luego.